This is Bill Kennedy with the Ardan Labs podcast, and today our special guest is John Reese, all the way from Michigan. How you doing, John?
I am doing fantastic. Yes, I'm in Michigan. It's cold. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on too, because the few times we've talked, I feel like you've had a really interesting career so far, and we're going to explore all of that, but and other things, obviously. But before we go too deep, give everybody your 2-minute kind of elevator speech on what you're doing now in tech, who you are, what you're doing.
So currently I'm an engineer at Yubico. I'm on their enterprise services team, so little to no work on the actual YubiKey itself. The tech that goes into that is way above my pay raise and expertise. So the team that I'm on is focusing more on enabling enterprises to be able to adopt hardware-based authentication for their organization. Because there are some challenges with that. I mean, the YubiKey right now and forever is a physical device. So if you want to mandate that all your employees have to use a YubiKey for authoring with their devices, you have to buy one for them. You have to ship it to them. You have to register the key to their accounts. There's a lot of logistics in that. And the second challenge is we're all human, like we're bound to lose them. I lose my keys 3+ times a day. And when that happens with a YubiKey, you have to deprovision it, you have to change out the key. There's a lot of things that go on with the enterprise. We have 1,000 employees. So team I'm on tries to make that a breeze. Beyond that, I'm also heavily involved in the open source. I do a lot of work with the Open Policy Agent organization. Currently, the two biggest projects that I'm working on now are Constraint and Comtest. Constraint helps you manage Rego policies and working with OPA's Gatekeeper. And then Comtest is another tool that lets you test configuration data through Rego and through policies.
Within the scope of an hour, we're going to get back there because I already have some questions about some of the stuff you're doing there. But the way we tend to like to start this show is asking our guests to kind of go back into the time machine and give me the first memories that you have working with a computer. Well, what are your first memories? And if you can kind of give me a general sense of how old you were, and if you don't mind some dates, it just really helps. It helps give people a time frame of what computing was even like then.
So let's see, the first memories that always come to mind with computing was definitely sitting in our family room with a computer. It was Windows 95, and I would have been I remember things by grades. I know this was like second or third grade, which is what, like 8 years old.
Yeah, 7, 8.
Somewhere around there. And there was like a mouse trap game where you had to like fetch the cheese, and there was just a lot of other games that I would screw around with. And there was this chat room that I was somehow allowed to go on called Microsoft Comic Chat, and I was like always the tiki man. But it was a chat room where you would chat and your characters were little comic strips. I don't think that's a thing anymore, but. That's definitely one of the memories that really stick with me for some reason. Yeah.
Was this like, were you talking to? You must have been talking to kids your own age, or you don't think your parents would have been?
I mean, it was one of those. It was the internet. I mean, it was relatively. I mean, I guess the internet as we know it was relatively newish, so I didn't know their ages. I mean, definitely one of the younger kids on the internet at that time. But yeah, it was. I'm sure it was filtered. I'm sure it was fine. I mean, I'm alive today, so it all worked out.
How sad is it that we have to say I'm alive today, right? Like,
I know.
Oh, that's horrible. Though I will attribute TV to a lot of problems because I'm watching The Blacklist right now and the crazy things that go on. It's an amazing show, right? But
so good.
Some of the things that the writers have thought about in the show scare me. It's almost like, why did that even pop into your head, you know? All right, so your first really early memories, you're like second grade, around 8 years old. You have siblings? Are you competing with that computer in your house, or is that something that you have more access to than others?
I do have siblings, or a sibling, but no competition. So I have one older brother. He's 12 years older than I am. Technically a half brother from his dad and my mom had like separated, so on my mom's side. But by this time, like he's would have been 20, 21 at this time, so he's off in his own house doing his own thing. He is also very into computers, but I get the machine all to myself.
When's your first memory of actually writing any code, and was it on that computer or was it somewhere else?
Oh no, yeah, it was definitely that one. That's why I can't remember like how I got into it. I've always just attributed it to my brother because he did do a lot of like web hosting on the side. He did random hardware computer work, but the first memory that I always have when it comes to programming was actually making websites with a program called Netscape Composer. Way back in the day, it was a WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get, and that was like my jam for the first like year or so before I got into the more advanced things. But I remember just making the most random things. Like we would do Freddy the Carnivorous Frog. I had multiple iterations of John's World. I think I made that website like 3 different times because I would come back to it, learn something new. And yeah, you'd post it on Angel Fire, you'd post it on GeoCities, and then just for the whole world, maybe you'd put some information out there that you weren't supposed to, but that's just how the world worked back then. But yeah,
John's World. How old are you? Were you now a teenager? You must have been a teenager at this point.
Oh no. Sorry, this was still like third, fourth grade-ish.
You're publishing websites in 4th grade called John's World.
Yes.
Where are your parents at this point?
They're in the house, but yeah, I mean...
First of all, how do you even know how to do that? Your brother's showing you how to do this?
It had to have been. As I was saying, I don't remember how I got in front of it, but I remember Netscape Composer. I remember making these websites. I remember pushing it out there. I remember being really frustrated with how to create hyperlinks. Because one page is simple, right? It's one file. You add you drag and drop an image, you hit save, you hit publish or whatever, and it's just there. Hyperlinks are a whole new beast. You have to have another file. You have to somehow link those files together. I mean, I probably spent like a week, some uncountable amount of time trying to get this hyperlink to work. But after I got that, it was just like, this is what... Like, I need to keep on doing this.
Dude, okay. Look, you're like 9, 10 years old, and you're already doing things that, I don't know, maybe you got a 14-year-old doing at this point. So you're already like 7 years ahead of the curve here. So
yeah.
What happens between now and like before you even start high school? Did you lose an interest in this at all? Or
it definitely progresses. So yeah, I guess, yeah, so if we keep pushing forward in time. The next memory that I'll never forget, related to computing, was definitely 6th grade typing class. Because like before this, we had no computer classes. It was just the first one that we actually had was a typing class, and the teacher gave me so much crap because even to this day I type with 2 fingers, but I'm a very good 2-finger typist. We're talking like 80, 90 words per minute, flex. But she always was like, imagine how well you would do if you would type with all your fingers. And I'm just like, this is what I've been doing since, 2nd, 3rd grade. I'm very proficient at it. Like, I'm good with these guys. And so it's always like a fun memory that I remember going through computing. But it was also around that time, around 6th grade or so, when I started actually getting into I guess programming, because that's when I picked up PHP. Still keeping on with like the website theme. I was just trying to do more, and PHP was definitely my gateway to that. I remember trying to write it, and I would type in like an if statement of like just if true, print out this thing, and you'd hit save and you'd open it up and it would be like, if true, this print out this thing. Like, it's supposed to like if it's supposed to print out that thing. And it's just I didn't understand the concept of like server side rendering, and it was just like I just could not get this thing to work, and it's driving me bananas. And again, as I said before, like my brother's into this, so luckily he actually had the web hosting business, and so he actually created me an account, and so I just used that to upload all my PHP stuff. But that was the other kind of frustrating moment. But once I got that, and like we started getting into actual programming and if statements and logic, again, just mind blown. Like now it's no longer static sites. Now we're talking like actual logic, actual programming.
I feel like your brother's your dealer, dude.
Kind of.
I mean,
yeah.
He is kind of almost like, I'm going to get this kid in trouble. One way or another. I'm setting him up for disaster. Because now you got real web hosting. That means you now have a domain. You're in 6th grade, John.
It's so good. Yeah. That's actually that's such a good comparison, because I will never forget, like I don't even know how it happened. It's almost just like it did, and he was just always in the back. He was an enabler. Yeah. He was just always pushing me along and just giving me opportunities like, oh, I really want to do this, and then just came out like a fairy and just, oh, here you go. Here's free hosting. It's like, okay, thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I'll take that. But yeah, it definitely took over my life at that point. We're talking like printing out PHP tutorials like on paper and bringing them to class with a highlighter and writing PHP code on blank pieces of paper and then trying to like figure out like would this actually compile? Because I'm just one of those individuals where in 6th grade. Because I'm one of those people where I get an idea in my head. I'm just like, I'm here thinking in class, like they're talking about government, they're talking about civics, whatever you learn in 6th grade. And I'm just like, would that work? And I just write it down. And then I go home and see if it actually works or not.
Were you into anything else at this point? Were you playing sports? I know Michigan's got, you got all year round sports. So nothing sports, nothing music, nothing else?
All of that. So,
okay.
So yeah, no, I am / less so now, but very, very into music. My dad is actually a very, very good bassist, upright bass guitar. I've done a lot of jazz bands. I was in a band with him I actually went to Africa with him in the 5th grade to go on a band tour. I didn't get the opportunity to play the drums because they had a drummer, but I was doing the maracas, I was doing the tamarines. Went to Spain and Africa on a tour with him. Tangentially, because I love this story as well. When we coming back from Morocco, back to Spain, after we all got off the bus, we got a message from the bus driver who was like, okay, like, now that you're all off, apparently there were like stowaways under our bus. They had like hooked on themselves onto the axle, like taking the ferry from Morocco back to Spain. I love that story as well. But yeah, definitely did the music. So I played the drums, and then also avid hockey player. Less so with the pandemic, but I've played hockey since I don't remember when I started, like elementary school at some point. But you kind of have to in Michigan.
So all of these activities are time consuming, right? I imagine if you're playing hockey in a league, so you have practices, you've got those games, you're doing music, that takes time to practice, and then you're also fitting in any other ounce of brain power into writing these websites. What is your first PHP website doing? Is it still just content based, or was there something like special that you finally were able to do that you couldn't do before?
100%. So the first one I can't really recall, but the what I really used it for early on was I was also and still am a very avid gamer. And so back in the day, there was a game called Uniball where it's space age hockey. Imagine you're playing hockey, but it's spaceships. And it was actually, I'm just going to say, it was ahead of its time. Like they had leagues where you could compete against each other. They had squads where you could make teams. They had a fantasy league where you could draft players, and we'd hop on Ventrilo and we would do like drafts for it. And I made a laddering system for Uniball. So all that's in PHP, where you could like report your games and it would calculate all the chess scores. I did the Uniball Fantasy League, which was effectively that, where you'd have a reporting system, a drafting system, a fantasy points system, all of those in PHP and on the web. So a lot of my PHP development was for leagues and supporting that game.
Okay, but that's what, 7th, 8th grade you're still talking?
No, this would have been around there, like 6th, 7th, 8th grade or so.
John, I'm not even thinking about fantasy sports, the 6th, 7th, 8th grade and all that stuff. This is mind-blowing to me. But I mean, some of this is really ahead of its time in terms of even the data and the stats that you're collecting.
Oh yeah, and don't get me wrong, like the code was like probably we'll just say that it was atrocious. And a lot of the logic, don't get me wrong, I was probably Googling or Alta Vistaing calculate chess score. Like I'm not the one solving that. I'm just doing a bunch of if statements of like, hey, a report came in, run this chess score thing.
Does your school in 7th, 8th, or even getting into high school, are they offering computer classes at all at some point?
So aside from the typing one, the first computer class that I actually remember having was 8th grade. It was called Tech Lab, and that was... Yeah, it was a pretty boring class. I mean, it's just because about the things I've already done. We, the assignments are learning how to create folders. They're learning how to Google. They're learning how to use Quark Express, which I think was some like publishing thing. Very, very basic stuff at this point.
You must have been going out of your mind in that class, right?
I was, and so funny story. So, I mean, yeah, I told my mom, like, hey, I had this class called Tech Lab. And she knew at this point I was doing the whole computer thing. And to what degree? Probably not that well. But she actually went to the school. She told them, like, hey, my son John, he's a little bit more advanced. Like, he needs to be entertained. Yeah, this, that, and the other thing. If you don't, like, something's going to happen. I don't think she said that last part, but that's more or less what did happen. So I have to preface, like, I feel like I'm a good person, but I did get bored, and I went through a little bit of a rebellious phase, right? So how to say this?
The statute of limitation is over, John. The statute of limitation.
I know, right?
Okay.
So what happened? I mean, yeah, I'm not joking. Like, it's folders, it's Google searching, and so like I put a program on one of the students' computer, on one of the computers on the lab. It was effectively like a Trojan horse virus type deal where you could install it and then you could control it remotely, and you could do things like you could like flip the screen upside down. You could get like dumps of the key logs. You could log them out. You could do whatever, right? And so. And one of those would have gotten away with it too, but here I am, a genius. One of my friend and I, who's also very into computers, we wrote our own little one-to-one cipher, silly language. Like an A was a character, a B was a character, very simple stuff. We actually got pretty good at writing it. And I remember basically admitting everything on that piece of paper. And like I left it in band camp one day, or band class one day. And I think like a week later, I just got a call like, John, come down to the principal's office. I'm like, okay, I never get in trouble. I'm a goody two shoes, A, B student. And yeah, they sit me down and saying like, son, this is a major infraction. I'm like, what did I do? It's like, what did you know about this? Like, oh yeah, I guess.
How did they know you had written it?
That's a great question, Bill. Actually, I don't know how they knew it was me. Maybe handwriting, or maybe I put Nick's name in there or something. I don't know. That's a great question.
But it was encoded, so they also decoded this message?
Yes, they did decode it. I remember getting it back, and like the message was decoded with like the letters on top of it. But yeah, it was like, you figure out, the E is the most common letter, so there you go. I mean, it was, congrats to them. But yeah, I pretty much admitted to everything, and yeah, they suspended me for 3 days, I think it was.
Wow. And then they had to clean the computers up?
Yeah.
Or they asked you to clean them up?
No, they did. They definitely did. I remember like them like really drilling me like, we need to know everything you did. Like, you tell us everything. I'm just like, I just installed this program. I don't know. And they were like freaking out about like, this is really bad because you could have gotten the teacher's credit card information and this, that, and the other thing. It's like, I guess, but I was so bored. I was so bored.
What did your parents say? Did you get in trouble for these 3 days? Or they laughed at it? What was your brother saying? Your brother must have been laughing.
He was like, yeah, it's like, fist bump. It was weird. Like, it was that like, we can't fault you, we're disappointed in you, but we can't fault you because, as I said before, like my mom, she did go to the school. Like, she told them like, you need to do something. So I think she was just more like, it was bound to happen, be a better person.
Nobody got hurt.
No one got hurt. I think we went to Wisconsin to go look for a car just because like it was nothing. It was a 3-day vacation, if you will.
You were never allowed in the lab again after that, right?
The complete opposite. So yeah, so like that was 8th grade, and I remember so high school was actually really good. So like 9th grade for us was high school. I remember things definitely got a lot better in that regard. Like the teacher wasn't like as good, but still like, he was very, very receptive to my needs as a student. And I definitely got the talk of like, do you promise to use your powers for good? Like, yeah, sure. And but yeah, beyond that, they gave me opportunities for independent study. They gave me opportunities to like I rewrote the district website for the school. It's no longer there, but if you go to Wayback Machine, it'll say like created 2004 John Reese, which I always thought was pretty cool. But high school definitely opened up a lot more opportunities, and my past sins were forgiven.
What year did you graduate high school?
Graduated high school 2007, 007.
All right, 2007. Okay. So actually, a question I do have is, as you're progressing through high school, what are you now thinking about as your next steps? Do you have a job? Are you even working in high school? What are you thinking about after high school?
So I did have a job in high school. It was a summer job, actually working IT for the school, which again was hilarious given my previous event. That job was effectively working under the IT guy, the systems admin, kind of boring stuff. It was a lot of building computers, putting all the computers together in the lab, wiring all the computers in the lab, pushing updates. I remember using like Norton Ghost to push a bunch of images to all the computers, debugging issues that would happen. So while it wasn't like the most exciting work and it wasn't programming, I'm glad I had that experience because you just have to, you learn a lot of things and you learn how to troubleshoot because you turn a computer, you get an error code, sometimes they blue screen. And so you're learning just how to troubleshoot a wide number of issues. We're talking hundreds of computers, hundreds of different issues. It was a great experience. I think that one paid like $10 an hour, which is pretty good for a high school student over the summer.
That's good. 2007. I mean, that's not bad.
No.
So what are you thinking as you're progressing through high school? Are you thinking university? Are you thinking I have enough skill to just get a job? Are you thinking hockey and music? Like what's going on as you're getting older and graduating?
So I definitely had, so like growing up, the dreams were definitely professional hockey player or computer science. The hockey thing, that's just never going to happen. I'm being real with myself. Like it was definitely a hobby, never going to be that good. So we're definitely thinking computer science. And at that point in my life, I was definitely thinking college 100%. In hindsight, I don't know if it was the right decision or not. I mean, I always think that all the decisions that we made up until this point, they made us who we are. So for right or wrong, they were the right ones. But I was definitely thinking have to go to college because that's the formula for success and professionalism. You go to college for 4 years, you get your bachelor's, and then you get a job. You can't get a job without a bachelor's. So I went. And that was kind of always the plan to go.
So music is really, really a hobby. Music is not at all on your list.
No.
No, that's fair. And you still play the drums today, right? I mean, or I could get you on stage and you'd be able to hold your own.
If it's like riding a bike, yes. I have not played the drums in years. Did a lot of apartment living, and again, I'm very self-conscious of other people, so I'm not bringing a drum set into an apartment complex. Like I could not do it. I'd have like an enormous amount of anxiety that I'm like annoying people. So I have not played a drum set in forever.
Did you ever see the movie The Adventures of Power? You got to
No.
watch this movie, dude, because it's all about air drumming. And I think in an apartment, you could have learned how to air drum. No, Adventures of Power. You got to
opportunity.
watch this movie, dude. You're going to laugh, especially you as a drummer. You're going to laugh, right? Like in the movie, they're
I'll
like,
watch it this weekend.
anybody can hit, the drum, but, they bang on the essence of life. Okay? So,
I will definitely have to give it a watch.
You got to watch that movie. All right. So I'm assuming that you decide to go to a 4-year university for computer science, right? Wrong?
Yes, computer science.
Yeah. Talk to me about the degree there. Was it easy? Was it hard? Was it what you wanted? What did you figure out at university as relates to the degree?
I would say it was definitely easy to start. So there was the typical intro to computer science class that they always give you. You could actually test up into like advanced intro to computer science, something like that. And so I did test into that. But even then, it was still the same kind of deal of like if statements and loops, and that was all based in Java. And that's a lot of how the first couple of years went, more or less. And then there was all the other general education courses that like did just destroy me, because I'll say I was very, very good in the computer science aspect, but everything else was very like hard to focus on, because it was just I didn't care that much. I cared about the grade and doing well, but the content itself, it didn't excite me. So it was very hard to get through those classes. The one class that I remember just getting destroyed in college was definitely data structures. Admittedly, I think I took that class like 2.5 times. Half coming from I'm not doing this, and I dropped out the first time, and then I took it once, and I took it another time, because that class was ridiculous for me.
Why do you think that was? Because you were being really productive from an early age. You're being really productive.
Oh, yeah.
You're building websites. I imagine you haven't stopped, even in university, building websites or something, right? I mean, I imagine
Correct.
You're still doing crazy stuff, right? So you were really productive. You were very practical. You knew how to integrate. You knew how to solve problems. Why do you think the data structures was it just too abstract, or?
So I think for me, the best way to explain it would be how you often, or at least what I learned from you, like engineering versus programming. Like up until this point, I've just been programming, right? I knew about arrays, I knew about linked lists, I knew about all these concepts, but I've never built any of them. I never cared about timings. I never cared about performance. I knew how to program. I knew how to get the thing to work. But then come data structures, and they're like, well, now you actually have to like build a linked list. You actually care about performance. You have to know that when you add a node to a linked list, it's constant time. But if you're searching through a linked list, it's order n time. If you're using an array, it's order n for this and log n for heaps. And it's just all this math and all this stuff you actually have to learn to actually to prepare yourself to actually engineer about problems. That it was kind of like a wake-up call of, okay, well, yeah, this can actually be some difficult stuff. So I was finally having a professor. I was having a established institution like enforcing and double checking my work, because they cared that the program worked, but they also cared, was it done correctly? I feel like was the biggest eye opener for me.
And at the time, were you kind of dismissive with this? Like, why do I have to learn this? And is it different for you now, or?
So I think, I mean, I was, it was definitely, it was, I was interested in it. I don't think I considered it to be useless, at least like a data structures class, because I did see the value. There were some aspects of it that I didn't like, like all the trees, the red, blue, red, black trees, and a lot of the more advanced stuff. Same with picking out like merge sorts and heap sorts and bubble sorts. Like even back then, you could just copy paste a sort. I don't need to memorize that stuff. Knowing when to use them is important, but actually implementing them from scratch, yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of, which was more or less the harder part, like actually implementing the structures versus using them.
What other things are you interested in university? Are you still playing hockey, intramural, or even for the university at the time?
Yeah. College was so yeah. I still did intramural hockey. Was in a hockey league over there. Joined the pep band, which is actually a phenomenal experience. They call it, it's not a marching band, it's called a scramble band. The uniform was a crazy hat. You had to have a hat. It could be anything you wanted. Mine was a fire hat, a fireman's hat. They gave you yellow and black overalls, and it was just the pep band. We would play with the hockey games, the women's basketball game, any sport that they had. We were there for it, and that was kind of my my outlet for music. And then later on in university, I also joined the jazz band, which all those counted for my physical education credit. So I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that means you're able to read music. Like,
Yeah.
to me, it's a little bit more than a hobby. Like, I mean, you're a musician. You can read music. You're playing in these bands. That still took time and practice and all of that.
Oh yeah.
Outside of your studies, like, what was a website or something that you remember you built for personal while in university? Because you were doing a lot of that before university, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Websites for me were definitely an amazing creative outlet because you could just publish it and give it to someone. Like you didn't have to, there was no binary involved. They were just so versatile, and it was just a great medium to give to individuals. For websites, a lot of it was the stuff I was talking about before with like all the leagues. Like that took a lot of my time because I played that game for forever. Like beyond that, I also did a lot of just coding in World of Warcraft, actually, another game, where I did a lot of like raid add-ons, published a lot of Lua there, did a lot of other work, but I can't really think of any like websites in particular outside of the ones I've already listed.
You're about to graduate university. You're about to get this degree. We are now talking, I guess we're talking what, 2000 and... Well, you graduated high school 2007. So
Correct,
are
yeah.
we... Yeah, so we're graduating university then around 2011, 2012.
Yes.
Okay. And as you're about to graduate, apparently you didn't get in any trouble in university. I guess you got it all out of your system in middle school and high school.
So I have to say this is another, like, at least for me, funny story. I'm using this like to like profess all my sins. So one thing that did happen was I took French in college. I don't really know why. It wasn't a requirement. It was just something I just like, I'll try something new. And here I am, right? I'm sitting in class one day, and I realized that every so often the teacher's computer makes a noise. And I'm like, well, that's interesting to me because I get distracted easily. And I pieced together that it's actually when she gets an email. And Bill, I don't know why, I decide that day, I go home, I go back to my dorm, and I wrote a program that would send her an email every 5 minutes from Time Lady at time.gov.
During class? Or just
and I schedule it. No, I schedule it during class, Bill. And so class starts, right? And on the dot, it's just every 5 minutes. Ding. Ding. The time is
Everybody
now
hears this, or do you
12:05.
think you just hear it?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's in the class. I mean, so unless you were somehow filtering it out, like you heard it. I mean, 12:05, 12:10, 12:15. Ding, ding, ding.
And you're wishing you had done it every minute.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess maybe I could have done it sooner, but I was trying to make it a bit more like believable and just like I don't want her to like run over and fix it. Like I want to see like how long I could get it to go for. Because the first couple of times it was just like you're getting an email, but after a while she was like okay and just kind of like turned it off. It was like 30 minutes in.
How great would it have been? Even not today, you could have just been in the classroom changing frequencies around, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea.
So tell me about now you're about to graduate university, right? And now I guess you're thinking it's time to get a job. So
yeah,
what are your choices? What do you want to do at that point as you're getting out of university?
So my choices, I was definitely along the lines of something to do with web development. I mean, that's where I was most comfortable with. From talking to you, I mean that's what I've been doing forever. So I'm Googling, I'm monster.comming, I'm whatever websites are out there to find jobs. I just throw my resume out there to whatever really finds whatever sounds interesting. I wasn't really beholden to any one location. I knew that I could live in California, I could go back to Michigan. I didn't really care. I was just kind of looking for any opportunity out there that would take me. I was new to the world of job hunting, professional job hunting. So I didn't know really what to expect.
Yeah, except you had a 6-page resume, right? You had a 6-page resume that started when you were in 6th grade. I should have done your resume for you, man.
Oh, that would have been awesome. If I would have known you back then, I totally would have had you do it. But yeah, I did find a job eventually, someone who would take me in, and to your point about resume, I will never forget. I actually used a lot of what I learned in like my Uniball days during the interview itself. It was a whiteboard. So sorry, I decided to go with Plex. They're a SaaS manufacturing company, so they are a website, and they're responsible for handling all the day-to-day operations for a manufacturing company. So accounting, finances, shipping, creating parts. They were the company I decided to go with because they had a YouTube video where they showcased like the ping pong tables, and they had like a kitchen with free snacks. I mean, it was like Google in Michigan. So I'm like, we're doing it. They also offered me more than what I asked for. Like I remember like the head tech guy, he asked how much you want to make. I'm like, I don't know, like 60. That sounds about right from what I've Googled. Like, no, we're giving you 80. You start tomorrow. Oh, okay. So I'm like, I was like sold for life. Like this is definitely the company. Like we're doing this. And during the interview process, though, yeah, I used a lot of what I had learned through all those. I mean, they asked me like SQL questions, like, well, I even said out loud, well, this is how we did it in Uniball, and we talked about like the relationships between like books and authors and linking things together and foreign keys and creating tables, and I did my whole whiteboard in PHP with. I think it was actually FizzBuzz like 11 years ago. Just did all that in PHP. And I, from my opinion, I didn't really learn much of that in college. I learned all the timings, but all that knowledge that I applied in that interview, I don't think much, if any, was attributed to my college experience. It was all my freelancing experience. You
had already a decade of experience building things and getting them out there, right?
Yeah.
And that helped. But I'd put money on it. They must have. I'm sure they asked you a handful, if not more, academic types of questions you were able to answer as well. The university probably got you really well-rounded by the time you started interviewing.
It's quite possible, yeah. And for me, I mean, there are so many things that you don't really know how you came to that answer or where that knowledge came from. I mean, one of the benefits of college is to round you as an individual. So yeah, there's definitely some aspects and practices and problems that I leaned on that it just isn't immediately obvious to me.
So you're starting this job then in what, 2012?
2011, because I graduated 2011, and then it took me 3 months to find that and get that.
And how long were you with this company?
I was at Plex for 9.5 years.
That's
Yeah.
amazing to me, right? You were basically there for a decade. Tell me about that, because that is ridiculously rare to find in the industry today.
I have
What
heard
was
that.
what was it that kept you there so long? Did you just feel really challenged? Were you just like, what was it, do you think? And what did you do over those 10 years to keep you interested in staying there?
Sure. So it was definitely so. I mean, it started off great. I mean, we're at that point first professional job, and everything is brand new. Like I don't know anything about like data replication, like different database servers and connecting to different databases, and just the complexities that go into those types of systems. It's always been programming assignments or just very, very small systems. So starting off, it was very, very challenging. As time went on, it got a little bit easier, and I did feel like the pace in which the technology wasn't necessarily keeping up with my interests. But I did stick around for a very, very long time just because of the culture. Even when I'm considering looking for new places, like culture for me has to be number one. The people have to be number one, because those for me are what really make or break an environment. If you go to company A versus company B, Go is always the same, PHP is always the same. It's the people that really make it. And I made a lot of really great friends there. I still talk to them. They were it was a great place to work, but at some point you do just kind of outgrow it. To talk about your other point about what did I do to keep myself entertained, a lot of it was open source. I found a happy place there where I could have a lot of great friendships at Plex, kind of just do my job, do what was expected, but also work in a lot of other different problems and technologies, different languages. And for me, open source is what really kept me engaged and kind of kept me there. I didn't really think I had to go anywhere because I didn't really feel like I was missing out on anything because I had the open source.
It seems to me prior to this job, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I get this impression that you can become very restless if you're not being challenged all the time. If something's not getting you to focus, you become restless, and then you start to have fun, right?
Oh yeah,
is that
100%?
right? And
Nailed it.
It's surprising to me that you stay in this one place for 10 years with that sort of personality trait.
No, so yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't. In hindsight, I probably should have left earlier, but there's also a part of me where there's a loyalty aspect of it. Like I want to make sure that I've exhausted all possible avenues. I don't like to just hop from place to place. I do it for. I don't do it for the money. I do it for the people. There was a loyalty aspect, and I know a lot of individuals nowadays will it's if you find a better opportunity for compensation, just go and take it. You don't owe anything to your work, which I fully understand that argument, but I just really wanted to make sure that I did exhaust all possible avenues, which is more or less kind of why I stayed.
But where do you think that comes from? Because university, you were done in 4 years. There's a time limit on that. High school, there's a time limit on that. Sports, there's a time limit on that. Right? Like this is the first thing in your life that didn't have a clock, and you stayed for 10 years. And now you're telling me that you want to exhaust every single path before you feel like it's time to move. Where does that come from? And I almost feel like this is the first real test of that kind of personality trait.
No, yeah, that's actually a really interesting perspective. I never really thought of it that way, where everything else was time box. I was never put into time box in this. Yeah, I think a lot of it and don't get me wrong, there's definitely some just innate fear there where like there's some comfort there where I know that there's a paycheck coming. I know like I'm never going to get let go. I'm doing very well there. and all my friends are there. It's a very safe place, and I know I battled back and forth of like, do I need to just become unsafe? I need to step out of my comfort zone. And it took me a while to kind of learn that. So that was definitely holding me back as well. And I do know that looking back, where I probably should have, but I was afraid to step out of that comfort zone.
And you're married, right? How long have you been married? You got married while you were in that job?
I'm not married, Bill.
Oh, okay. Apologize for that.
No, sorry. I have a girlfriend, but no, not yet married. Of 4 years.
Okay. So
she has ass though, Bill.
Yeah, we're not going to have any recordings of that. Wrong podcast, different day. The reason I ask, John, is because sometimes what happens is you're married and you have kids, and the stability of a job ends up outweighing your love for it, let's just say, right? Because you have that level of responsibility here. But tell me if I'm wrong. I don't sense that, right? I mean, yes, you have a long-term girlfriend, but it's not because you've got mouths to feed or you've got a financial situation. You just really loved being there. I think you loved being around the people. Yeah,
I mean, to your earlier point to me, she was very supportive of all my decisions. It was never like it was never a feeling of trapped, based on my current predicament. It was comfort. It was knowing everybody, and I was being challenged through the open source. If open source didn't exist, then it might have been a catalyst to get out there. Because yes, I will get very restless if I don't have anything challenging me. But I found other outlets to do that, and I'll be the first person to admit that I've said multiple times over my career there at Plex that the work wasn't the greatest. I stayed for the people. Open source is and was always my happy place. I always felt happiest working on open source work, not the work that I was doing. And I mean, it did get better. I mean, towards the end, I mean, we did make a push towards the end of my career there to move into like microservices and Kubernetes and Terraform, and so the last few years were, it kind of picked up again. There was a breath of fresh air towards the tail end.
So I am sure there are other people listening to this who are following the same path. So what's really interesting to me is what finally allowed you to move on to the next job after 10 years. That must have been like pulling teeth a little bit inside your head to do that, right?
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, again, even like candidly, I remember like man tears crying to my manager. Like I had known him for 4 years at this point. I'm just telling him like I have to go. Like there's just that this company is moving in a direction that I don't see myself being at. I've been here forever. Like now is just the time. And it was a very hard talk. I remember he called me like the following Saturday, because it was on a Friday, and he was very supportive. But yeah, I don't know if there was any one moment. It was a lot of little moments. A lot of management there had become incredibly top heavy, and they were making a lot of technical decisions that I didn't feel like were beneficial to the company. Engineers were having less and less power, so I felt like I could make less and less of an impact, and that eventually it just became our impact was so minimal that I had to go. It was kind of like the last straw. I think it was like when they had made a decision of like they were going to change our whole like development process, and then not a single engineer was consulted, and I was just like, okay, like we're done.
So how long was it from the time you put your first resume out there to the time you got the next job? Did you think this was going to take you 6 months and it didn't? I'm really curious. Some of the fears you had going in, right? What were some of the fears you had going in, and like what kind of research did you do before you did that sent your first resume out?
So at the top of my list, I mean, fears were definitely, I mean, imposter syndrome, like bar none. I mean, we're talking, to your point, I did not realize that it was very common to have shorter tenures, especially like out in like the Bay Area. And so I'm thinking, crap, like, am I, did I stay in the same place too long? And how actually good is everyone else? And like, could I ever amount to that? So there's definitely some concerns of just not knowing all the latest and greatest tech. But the only, for me, it was like, I got to just throw it out there. It's just an interview. It's not really you're failing. You're just kind of trying to see what's out there. So that's a lot of how it started. I put a lot of resumes out there to a few places that sounded interesting. And surprisingly, at least to me initially, I got a lot of callbacks and went through a few interview processes, and they were all going really well, which gave me a lot of confidence to kind of just keep trying. Like, okay, maybe there is something to this, and maybe staying at that one place wasn't that big of a deal. But it was definitely a confidence booster just to put yourself out there.
And the job you have now, is that next job, or you had something in between?
No, yeah, it's the one that I have now at Yubico was that next job, and that was actually, I attribute, we'll just say all of that to open source. During my time at Plex, I actually wrote a tool called Constraint that makes management of your policies a lot easier. And one of the employees that I work with now at this current company was a user of that, and I really liked working with him. He effectively became a maintainer. We would talk about problems on Slack, and he became a really good friend. And just one day I just kind of asked him, like, hey, I'm kind of looking right now, like, do you like Yubico? Because again, I'm very culture focused. Like, do you like the people there? Would you recommend working here? And he said, like, hell yeah. So I put my resume in, and then went through the interview process, and here we are. And so now I'm actually working with him in an official capacity.
How do you feel about the change you made right now? In other words, do you feel now that you've been there how long now? A year? Been there a year?
A year, so yeah.
Yeah. So
9-10
now
months.
Now that you have let's just say a year under your belt, what are your thoughts about that? Right move, wrong move, should have done it earlier, no, it was perfect timing?
So it's, for me, I've asked myself this question a lot. For me, it's tough to say because I learned so much about what I do now in the last few years at Plex. Like, as I mentioned before, like Plex just started getting into like microservices and Go and Terraform towards the tail end. I have no regrets about leaving. It definitely was the right move. But I don't know if I would have had the skill sets to leave earlier. It's possible, but through my interview process and through what I do now, I learned my last few years there. So the timing feels about right because it gave me the skill sets that I needed, or I felt like I needed to succeed. But definitely, like no regrets. It was the right call to go.
Is this company also based in Michigan?
They are. So they have two offices. I guess like three technically, in Seattle, San Francisco, and actually Sweden. So there's a few offices around the world. Created in Sweden. Like, it was our founder is Swedish.
Do you know if and this is going to be a remote position for you going forward? They're not going to ask you to move or nothing like that, right?
So actually, I mean, when I got hired on, like the expectation was that it would be like brick and mortar, like you would actually have to go into the office, but they weren't pushing that because pandemic. But actually, as of late, I think the decree is more or less, it is going to be remote if you want to. I don't think they're. I think they've decided to allow individuals, developers, if you're able to work from home, just do it. So yeah, for the foreseeable future, it is a remote position.
So a couple things here as we round off our hour here. What are you doing on the side now to keep yourself busy and out of trouble? Because you have to stay busy, John, or you're going to be calling me for bail. I'm going to get a phone call from John. He's like, Bill. So what are you doing?
You probably would be one of the first people I would call, Bill. So yeah, I mean, again, I have to stay busy. I've kind of learned that. I get bored. I'm doing a lot of open source. I mean, in my little intro, it's a lot of open policy agent, Comtest policy. Try to find anything I can to do in the open source. I submit to every conference that I can for call for papers. So I spend a lot of my time designing presentations, doing PowerPoint. So I do have a creative side. So I love making PowerPoints. That's kind of my biggest one, my biggest endeavor currently right now is, it's just more open source work, I guess.
Have you done any talks? Have you been sharing any of this? Or is that something you're even interested in doing?
Oh yeah, I've given I've given talks at my previous company internally, but I've given a talk at CodeMash. I spoke the past 2 years at the Cloud Native Security Day on policy at KubeCon. So those are all on YouTube. But any opportunity that I get accepted for, I'd love it, because it's my opportunity to be able to kind of give back, because I do like mentoring, I do like teaching, kind of sharing my experiences, and it just gives me kind of an opportunity to really like focus and think through everything that I've learned and share that and connect with individuals. Like I really do miss all the conferences.
What is it about policy that you keep kind of getting pulled in that direction? The open source that got you this job was around policy. You just mentioned policy talks. What is it about computing and policy that's interesting to you?
So it's kind of like a happenstance of how I even got sucked into that world. So I'm very into testing, code quality, just making things work, because I love refactoring, and you can only do that if you have tests. And so when I was learning how to write like services for Kubernetes and configure Kubernetes, I'm like, how do I test this thing? And there was a talk that Gareth gave, who's like the creator of Comtest, called Unit Testing Kubernetes. And I'm like, that's my jam. So I watched it, and he presented Comtest. And I was just like blown away. I remember like spam typing to my friend, like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Like I've always wanted to know, like, how can we test our configurations? Because Kubernetes configurations are so hard to work with. Like we're getting better at it, but it's so hard. And so I'm like, I need to learn this tool. And I told Gareth, like, hey, I really want to work on this. And so I just divulged a lot of time learning how to use that tool. Come to find out, it's backed by OPA. It's really just a user-friendly experience when using Open Policy Agent. So you write configurations in Rego for your data. You put it through Comtest, and it gives you a nice little pass-fail based on that data, and it applies to like anything, YAML, JSON, Q, you name it. If there's a configuration for it, like OPA will support it.
Okay, interesting. So it was that engineering drive to be able to make sure you had tests, so you could do the rest of the engineering work that you wanted to do.
Oh yeah, because without like a tool like Comtest, I mean, you're saying the only way to make sure that your deployment works or your service works was actually deploy it to a cluster, which is an insanely long feedback loop. You have to deploy it and delete it and tear it down. Comtest like just made it so you could do it. It's like unit testing. My mind was just blown. Like I'm all in. You had me at unit testing Kubernetes.
We'll make sure this gets into the show notes so people can have access to that. All right, we're at the very end. So John, this is what I'm going to say is for your girlfriend, okay? Not for you. It's for your girlfriend, okay? Now we've learned that if you want John to make a decision, you got to put him in a time box. That's all I'm saying. Time box.
That's true.
John. Okay, so I'm going to send her for Christmas a little like clock. Like you're going to be in that time box, John, and that's it.
That's true.
Poor John.
What is it? That's Parkinson's law, right? Like developers will use all the time that they're given. So it's true.
We got to get you. All right, John. Let everybody know how they can reach out and talk to you if they have any questions after listening, or they want to know more about what you're doing with the policy stuff and like all these things, how can somebody reach out and talk to you?
So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, first and foremost, please do reach out to me. Again, I love helping people, would love to help you in any way. My contacts, Twitter, John P. Reese, with the @ symbol. And then like I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to send me a message. I've gotten messages there as well. Email john@Reese.dev. Really any means that's convenient for you. I look at all those mediums and I would love to help out.
Brilliant. All right, John. Well, thank you for spending an hour talking with us. The story was fascinating. We learned a lot about John. John now is going to go to therapy no. Just share this with your therapist before you go. No. It's all funny. Good. Anyway, John, thank you so much for talking to us for the last hour.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So this is Bill Kennedy signing off with the Ardan Labs podcast.